Good morning, everyone, and warm welcome to the second day of Vienna Migration Conference. We have another day of rich discussion with a range of perspectives, with a particular focus on labor mobility, reintegration, and cooperation. With another busy day ahead of us and actually 3 back-to-back sessions that will take place now, I will be super brief and immediately turn to Sedef, Deputy Director General and Director of Migration Dialogues and Cooperation at ICMPD, who will kick us off today. Sedef, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Justina. Good morning, everyone. As Justina said, we discussed yesterday various dimensions of migration policy. Today we're starting with a session on labor migration and what it means for a country of origin, especially from a development perspective. So, as you all know, especially, of course, on the receiving end, labor migration has been seen as a tool, perceived as a tool to address demographic challenges, labor shortages, skills shortages in many societies. On the receiving end, on the sending end, there are, of course, other interests addressing pressures on the labor market, but also, of course, labor migration is seen as an opportunity both for migrants and the communities they come from. Obviously, there are several potential development benefits of labor migration, such as including, as I've mentioned, reducing labor market pressures, spurring growth, increasing income, setting the stage, of course, for remittances, and enabling transfer of ideas and investments. Now, we want to talk all about that with you, Minister Cacdac, but of course, with all these potential benefits, it is still hinging on how a country of origin is able to utilize and make use of these potential benefits. So I'm very pleased to share the stage with you, with Mr. Hans Leo Cacdac, Secretary of the Department of Migrant Workers from the Philippines. We will be exploring the issue from perspective of a country of origin. Minister Cacdac, you have a wealth of experience when it comes to labor migration. Before, of course, working as Secretary of the Department of Migrant Workers in the Philippines, you held senior positions in the department, but you also held very senior positions in the Overseas Workers Welfare Administration, Philippine Overseas Employment Administration, Department of Labor and Employment, and I know that you've been also very active at international level, engaging with, for example, the Special Tripartite Committee of the Maritime Labor Convention, ASEAN Committee on Migrant Workers, various ILO committees on domestic workers, and on private employment agencies. So, and in ICMPD, as you know, we're talking with a lot of people, with European countries, with partner countries, and in many of these conversations, the Filipino model comes up as a model, aspiring model, as a model that both on the European side, destination countries, but also countries of origin want to learn more about. So very pleased to have you here. But let me begin by asking you the approach of Philippines when it comes to labor migration. The Philippines is one of the largest labor sending countries in the world. If I'm not mistaken, you have about more than 10 million overseas Filipinos. Correct me if I'm wrong. And in terms of registered migrant workers, more than 2.1 million. And of course, this is a quite large number. We know that Europe has a smaller share in that, but there have been also recent developments in this regard. You have signed a number of agreements with countries such as Germany, Austria, but even with the city of Vienna. So can you please tell us what makes the Philippines model different and an aspiring model, different from those of other countries of origin? What are the elements of success from your perspective? And do you still see room for improvement, and where?
Yes,
Thank you.
definitely. Thank you, Ms. Deering. Thank you. Good morning to all. I'd like to start with just a little bit of history. I won't narrate the whole range of history going back 1,000 years of migration with the Asian land bridges and such, and going through the Spanish galleon trades and such. But the current wave really started in the mid-70s with the oil crisis and the first group of engineers for Saudi Arabia traveled to Saudi Arabia to work in the oil fields companies there, and we've never turned back since. Of course, there are well-documented push and pull factors that go with it, which I need not get into. But let me just say that we have a strong legal heritage and history of compassion insofar as labor is concerned. We have a 90-year-old constitutional provision that was reiterated in subsequent versions of our Constitution, 1935. We vowed to protect labor, a forward protection to labor clause in our Constitution. We're one of the first, as I understand, to put this in our supreme law. But, of course, in the 70s, with the first wave of migration, 50 years ago, we marked our 50th year of migration management. Our president then, President Marcos, and we had a visionary labor minister, Blas Ople, laid the foundation for what still exists as core elements of our migration management system. First, regulation of the process of recruitment. As far back as 15 years ago, we already made it clear to ourselves that pathways to migration should be legal. And so we have actually one of the toughest illegal recruitment cases in the world. If you recruit in our country without a license from the government, you go to jail, regardless of your intent, of your motives, of what have you. We also have, and that tradition, should I say, carries over to this day. We retained our 10th year on the top of the Tier 1 list there in the U.S. State Department's Trafficking in Persons report. Second, we clearly laid the foundation for welfare and protection. If we are to be compassionate with our overseas workers, we must have welfare. We have a welfare fund that is just about 50 years old. We have labor attachés all over the world. Well, first deployments, obviously, in the 70s that cater to every kind of need of our workers abroad. And we also laid the foundation for skills as the highest form of protection. So back in the 70s, President Marcos created what he called the National Manpower Youth Council, which exists to this day as a promoter and an implementer of our programs on skills upgrading and development. And then, lastly, international cooperation. As far back as the 1970s and the 80s, we've been talking to countries hosting OFWs, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, in the Middle East, of course, and in Asia, with the ASEAN, our Southeast Asian grouping there. We have laid the basis for discussions on how else to enhance labor mobility in terms of safety and ethical recruitment, as well as protection of our nationals abroad. And needless to say, a combination of all these factors, whether it's protection, whether it's regulation, or skills development, if you combine all of those, we laid the basis for successful OFW integration. So as far back as 1970 and up to this day, we very well knew and understood how important it is to successfully integrate a migrant worker into the host country. Having said that, we have our own challenges, of course. We still know for sure that there are still vulnerable skill sets. By the way, we have around a little over 10, 11 million, by the way, but that includes permanent residents. So if it's just counting the temporary workers, that would run up to about 5 to 6 million. Estimates, of course, because of the estimates only that we could discern out of irregular migration. But definitely 90 to 95% of that which we know, or at least have documented, are obviously regular workers coming out of our system. But there are still vulnerable workers. So we know for sure that domestic workers are still in great numbers, and so we have our necessary protections and bilateral cooperation with the countries that host our domestic workers. While our remittances have been resilient, 38 billion US dollars last year, fourth in the world after India, Mexico, and China. We still are, of course, in the process, which we will get into in a moment, perhaps, developing and harnessing all these remittances. And perhaps another field of challenge would be reintegration and how else we can successfully provide employment and livelihood opportunities for returning workers.
Yes, indeed. As I was studying your model, I have seen that you've been putting now recently a lot of emphasis on reintegration as well. Of course, just a couple of years ago, we had the COVID pandemic, and as a result, you had to return back, repatriate a very big number of Filipino workers within a very short period of time. I think that has prompted your thinking also in terms of looking into reintegration. But can you please elaborate a little bit on that? What steps are you undertaking to address reintegration needs? But also the other issue you've raised about harnessing the potential of remittances. If you can go a little bit deeper in those both aspects.
Yeah, sure. Reintegration in terms of developing the program really cuts across many aspects of migration. In fact, we're finding out these days, well, probably a few years back, that reintegration begins before the worker has even left our shores. So that means all the elements I mentioned on successful reintegration, making sure the pathways are legal, making sure that we have the proper welfare protection mechanisms, that all must be set in place. Successful reintegration follows successful reintegration. So that's one. Second is that there's a lot of learning and education, and we could also get into this, lifelong learning that we are currently developing with our educational training agencies back home. So we have financial education and literacy for our migrant workers, and not just the workers, but the families back home. And we also have financial inclusivity programs. We also have anti-investment scam programs and investment opportunity learning sessions. We have the Philippine Stock Exchange, who has partnered with us to conduct sessions on how best to invest in the Philippine stock market. Very low percentage, by the way, of workers overseas invest in our stock market, so we're trying to up that metric. But also, in terms of harnessing remittances, we take this from a micro and a macro level. On a micro level, we go with, in terms of harnessing the livelihood opportunities for our workers. So once again, this begins with financial education, entrepreneurial education and such. We have our migrant workers offices in partnerships with our embassies all around the world conducting, let's say, business plan sessions, bookkeeping sessions, baking, and any kind of barista training, and any kind of work welding training, any kind of work that will harness the lifelong learning potential of our workers. But also, there are government programs such as tourism, Department of Tourism and Trade and Industry, franchising programs that are in store in terms of providing loan capital, seed capital for our workers who are interested. On a macro level, we have our central bank, part of the Bank for International Settlements, is part of the Nexus initiative, which essentially wants to put up a multi-stakeholder platform for instant payment systems that will lower the costs of remittances. That's very important to us. We pretty much are in gear in terms of fulfilling the SDG 10.C target of 3% by 2030. We're still up at around 5%. We're still a long ways to go, but we have time, I suppose. So with the BIS and the Nexus initiative, we're there. We have pension funds and welfare funds and an overseas Filipinos bank that has so far put together the resources and delivered financial products in return to our migrant workers, their families, and our people. So for instance, we have our Social Security that can reinvest all those funds. We have our welfare fund that can reinvest in our Farmers Bank, Land Bank, and our Development Bank of the Philippines. And we have, of course, as I mentioned, the overseas Filipinos back. We still have a long ways to go. In the neighborhood of around $1 billion or so put together and recirculated to our economy as compared to the 38 billion remitted. So we still have our work in progress, I have to admit there. Lastly, we're learning also to use whatever benefits or remittances OFWs provide to bring it back to them through health and welfare initiatives. We have an OFW hospital. We have a OFW Overseas Filipino Workers Hospital back home. The ILO tells us it's the one of a kind. It's the only migrant workers hospital specifically catering to migrant workers all around the world. We've serviced around 200,000 in the last 1.5 years or so of this OFW hospital. So these are ways in which we put together the resources that are brought back to the Philippines. Not perfect by any means, but we are a work in progress. We're headed in the way of our ultimate objectives.
If I understand from what you've said correctly, you've really been investing in your institutional structures and the governance of your labor migration system. So as far as I know, you've also established this one-stop shop, the
Yes.
Department of Migrant Workers. Is that a result of all these decades of experience of institutionally governing migration? Are you aspiring to work as a whole of government with a whole of government approach?
Yes, of course. And at this point, I need to mention our president, President Ferdinand Marcos Jr., who has been, of course, behind all our efforts in terms of reintegration, but also in terms of the one-stop shop. It's a little bit more than just a physical setup. It's a digitalized setup. That is primarily one of the president's directives. Aside from protection and reintegration, there is the matter on what the president calls red carpet and not red tape for Filipino citizens, including our OFWs, so overseas Filipino workers. So the one-stop shop essentially makes it easy for them. We have literally brought this one-stop shop around the world. We've had our 12th city recently in Rome. Of course, the digitalized efforts make this not necessary, but however, there are still some things that need to be done face-to-face. We have legal clinics. A lot of migrant workers have land and marital problems back home. I don't mean to spill that out here today, but we have the lawyers advising them as they are abroad. But also, we have a national ID system with the biometric element, so that requires a face-to-face transaction. So that's essentially is our one-stop shop. Around 16 to 17 government agencies there, Social Security, even our driver's licensing agency and housing and such, tourism and trade and industry, agriculture, all are in that one-stop shop package.
Thank you. I want to go a bit more specifically in some of the sectors in which Filipino migrant workers are engaged. And one of them, which is really of great interest also for the European audience, but also with partner countries aspiring, of course, to also enhance their labor migration governance systems, is the case of the nurses and healthcare workers.
Yes.
So, what is the aspiration of the Philippines when it comes to specifically nurses and healthcare workers? How do you overcome common obstacles such as language barriers, qualifications, recognition of qualifications? What is your experience in particular to nurses?
Yeah, it's good to focus on the healthcare workers because indeed they are very important. Obviously, COVID taught us this lesson, obviously. But the Philippine context, I think, is different. There is just such a strong demand for our workers, healthcare workers globally. And I'm just not talking about nurses, medical technicians and other types of allied health work. Now we're looking at the data and the deployments. I would say have been plenty. Around 50% of our healthcare professionals are abroad. That is the reality. But having said that, the President, through our Department of Health, also has lined up several initiatives, essentially in the area of resiliency. In the face of this global demand for workers, and in the Philippines as well, we are stepping up in terms of training and education. So we know for sure that the Department of Health has been talking to our Commission on Higher Education and how else to streamline our curricula for health professionals. We're trying our best to bring in those who can teach at the masteral, who can teach in the nursing schools, who require a masteral degree, and therefore there's some talk as well on making it easier for people to get a masteral degree, those who deserve it. I mean, not to make it easy for the for the non-deserving to pass, but for those who deserve it, and also labor conditions. So definitely our laws and labor department have been looking very well into how to further enhance the labor conditions of our workers in our country. Lastly, there is the WHO International Code of Practice and Recruitment. It's rather comprehensive, I would say. It covers the whole range of ethical recruitment to bilateral cooperation, and then, of course, what it calls the proportional benefit between source and destination countries. So all of these things we've been taking up in terms of the agreements that you've mentioned. We have 60 bilateral agreements, by the way. That I understand is also the highest around the world with the host countries. Not all of them are in the healthcare sector, obviously. But with respect to healthcare workers, we're making sure we're digging deeper. We're discussing things like training and education cooperation. In Upper Austria, we have some plans about 2 universities, our university in Upper Austria linking up with a university in Central Luzon in our biggest island province. So we have that particular partnership within the 2 universities to harness not just the preparation for Austria, but also to make sure that we have that proper talent base left behind in terms of more people trained in a world-class standard. So essentially, these are the ways in which we cope with the matter on healthcare workers. Going back to bilateral cooperation, it is most necessary, really, for the source and destination country to talk things over.
How do you overcome language barriers?
Okay, language barriers. We have language training programs with the Japanese, for instance. We have a pretty structured language training program, both in the Philippines and as they arrive in Japan. Japan has a fairly high language standards, so it is a rigid training system there that is agreed on both sides and at no cost to the worker. So essentially, those standards, especially the matter on no cost to the worker, is also the standard that we live by when we negotiate. We just make sure that language is not a hurdle, but rather should be facilitated so that our skilled workers should be able to perform their work. So this is something that we stand by. Language should not be a requirement to enter, but rather skills should be the requirement to enter, and language should be facilitated as a tool to exercise the skill.
I want to come here also to the specific case of women, because when we look at labor migration from the Philippines, it's of roughly or approximately about 60% of Filipino migrant workers are women. Of course, they have a great share in nurses and healthcare workers, but also in domestic workers. So this may have, of course, a social impact back in your country, but also with such a, when we're talking of such big numbers of labor migration, I can imagine there can also be demographic challenges or skills shortages. Do you experience that? Do you see that in the Philippines, and how do you overcome these if these challenges exist?
Yeah, first of all, in our country, we're known to be quite a gender-responsive country. We always rank in the top 10, if not the top 5. Gender responsiveness all around the world, the index, I think it's by the Economic Forum. But we have made strides in terms of establishing policies and legislation to keep our women workers in our country. So we have, for instance, repealed the prohibition on night work, which unfortunately has been there for decades. We have been promoting safe spaces and anti-sexual harassment and violence against women legislation to protect women in the workplace. We have a domestic workers law that was in line with our ratification of the Domestic Workers Convention, the ILO. By the way, we presided over the enactment of the ILO 189, the convention. We've kept them, we tried to keep them as much as possible in our shores. And if they do decide to go abroad, then we make sure we have protective measures in place. So we have boosted our assistance and financial funds. Our foremost reintegration program is for returning workers, returning women workers. Our welfare fund, for instance, spends to around 300 to 400 million pesos a year providing reintegration assistance, financial assistance to returning female workers. That's the tune to about 40 to 50 million US dollars a year. And our labor attaches on the ground are always trained to be more gender responsive and gender sensitive. We have legal retainerships that file cases on behalf of our women workers, including the retainerships of women lawyers who could properly handle sensitive cases involving our women workers. Literally, in our department, every day, literally, I'm not exaggerating, we talk to women workers and their concerns about 95% of the time. We stay focused and we make sure that women workers are protected. We have shelters in some of our posts, overseas posts, to make sure that they are safe when they come to us and seek shelter. They don't need to spend money about accommodations and such. They stay with us. We provide shelter, repatriation, help them with their cases and possible money claims on the ground, etc.
Thank you. You said something in the beginning that if somebody recruits directly or is recruited directly, like there's a criminal punishment for that. I just want to
without a license, yeah.
Yes, without a license.
Entity without a license.
So very practical question. If a country is interested in, or an individual employer is interested in recruiting labor from the Philippines, can a company and an employer approach you directly, or do you need a bilateral agreement?
Yes, a bilateral agreement would be most preferred, but the law says bilateral arrangements or agreements. So it's possible to have a bilateral discussion, a labor office opened in the host country that can trigger the mechanism, the process of mutual discussion towards safe and ethical labor mobility. We have some countries already in Europe that are undergoing this process. We're working on an agreement with them, but we have already been engaged in bilateral arrangements. There are preliminary agreements, of course, that are of intent, that are aspirational, which can set the process in gear. But yes, it's good that you brought up the illegal recruitment law, because it is illegal to directly recruit or to recruit a worker out of the Philippines without going through an agency that is licensed by our department.
Okay. And we have, of course, as I've said, several countries here in the audience. Would you like to share maybe what your expectations are from countries that are, and of course also employers that are recruiting actively from the Philippines? And also, what are your aspirations going forward, let's say in the next 5 years? Do you have any specific focus areas or plans when it comes to perhaps looking at agreements, their implementation, or specific sectors, or regarding skills?
Yeah, I'll start with the last point. In my trajectory here are two terms that have been mentioned, at least in the sessions that I've attended: migration management and governance. In the Philippines, we like to say it's migration governance. It cuts across horizontally across various stakeholders in migration, and vertically, local, regional, we have the Southeast Asian grouping, and international. And on a multi-dimensional aspect, it cuts across all phases of migration, from pre-departure to return. So in that context, we locate ourselves in international cooperation, which is also a term that's been bandied around. And that indeed is very, very critical. We must all be talking together about how to protect our best interests, and most especially with the migrant workers at the center of it all. There's no other way. I mean, 50 years of experience have told us the best way is really for both sides to talk, and we're experiencing that with European countries now. Now, with skills mobility, I'd like to say that the outlook is positive. From the World Economic Forum, the data shows that the skills insecurity or the gap or the sense that a certain skill will be outdated has drastically been lessened over the last 3-4 years, from 50 to 40 to 30%, so that's good. And we know for sure that from the same WEF, employers are in the mood to upskill, and that's where we want to locate ourselves as well in terms of lifelong learning. So we have our Commission on Higher Education, we have our skills, WalkTech, Skills Development Authority back home, and our department, our ministry, willing to engage countries of destination in terms of how best we could enhance the skills of people who are already there, and people who are on the way, and people who are left behind. And I'm talking about the families. And that's why we have programs for family and children's circles back home. Our president has always made sure every time we meet, he tells me, don't forget about the children. And so we have programs through our welfare fund that deal with the children's circles and programs on values orientation and arts and recreation and sports for children back home. I'm mentioning this because some destination countries have actually expressed interest to participate in programs that harness the development of families back home. So we've actually had government official counterparts visit migrant worker communities back home and get to meet the families. So the engagements are multidimensional, multifaceted. I find it really exciting, to be honest. I'm an optimist like the Swedish minister, so I'll end it with that, and just like to say we'll see you at the table, at the discussion table.
Maybe just one last question from me in that regard. Do you also see interest from destination countries in the skills development, sharing, let's say, developing skills together? You have, of course, a successful model with Germany. You've expressed, you've said before that there is a cooperation model between two universities, in Austria and in the Philippines when it comes to healthcare workers. Do you wish to see more of that? Are you working on that?
For sure, a global skills partnership with Germany, and then with Austria. With the Koreans and the Japanese. With the Koreans, for instance, our factory workers sent over there every weekend get to learn an extra skill, which can they either use to move up the organizational ladder in Korea, or they could bring home with them. So yes, definitely, skills development is in order. And as I said, I'm so glad from the World Economic Forum to see that employers are in this mood as well.
Thank you. This was a very interesting conversation, learning about your perspectives as a country of origin, and a very major one when it comes to labor migration. I'm sure there are questions also in the audience. I see already one hand here. So Hugo, please.
Good morning, Minister. Thank you so much for what was a really fascinating, granular discussion. I wish that we in Europe here talked in the detail and the precision about migration the way that you've given this fascinating tour d'horizon of supremely practical things you are doing. I'm a senior advisor here at ICMPD. I won't stand up because then I'll have my back to the entire audience. But I'm fascinated by the rise of the geopolitical world that we are living in, and unfortunately an increasingly transactional one. And I have always wanted to see a representative of what I would call a labor superpower. The Philippines is a labor superpower, so is India. Everybody wants Filipino healthcare workers and other workers from the Philippines. Everybody wants workers from India in a range of things, including information technology. My question to you is, in this transactional world, has it boosted the foreign policy power of the Philippines that so many people are knocking on your door and asking you for, in the case of highly transactional countries like Saudi Arabia, for example, have you had a foreign policy argument with Saudi Arabia and said, well, if you won't give us this, then you're not getting that? I know it's a bit sensitive, so feel free to ignore it. And
First of all, it's good to be called a superpower. So I have something glad to report to our president right after this session. We're a superpower, Mr. President. The answer is yes. But I would still stick on a positive note. I've been with the delegations of the president when he meets foreign heads of state. He was in the Czech Republic last year with President Pavel. And even just before they've sat down, President Pavel says, Mr. President, I wish to thank you for your workers. And our president says, Mr. President, to President Pavel, I wish to thank you for protecting our workers. So right off, right? There are so many things to discuss in that table that day, economy, security, etc. But to start things off, we're perfectly fine in the discussion. I mean, we got the ball rolling perfectly well because there is mutual understanding of how the harmonious relations between Czech employers and Filipino workers can promote so much goodwill between two nations. I mean, it's immense. I won't elaborate, as you said. I'll take your advice. But let me just say it has helped in a very huge way. Saudi Arabia, the president in his first State of the Nation address said, "Thank you, Saudi Arabia, and we will cooperate with you, Saudi Arabia." And well, that did a lot of things for us there. So yes, it indeed is a boost.
Thank you.
Superpower.
Yes, superpower indeed. Are there any more questions to the superpower here? Yes, I see two more hands. Yes, please. Madame El Fadil, please.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Minister, for elaborating on the experience of Philippines. My question is about remittances. Is the government interfering in how to invest the remittances of the Filipino migrants, or is it on the family level that every migrant support his or her family? Thank you.
Okay, the last part of the question, I was thinking about how we have controlled inflation. And it's down 2%, and we've kept it that way for the last almost year now. So that's good. So in that sense, we've kept more money in the pockets of Filipino workers. But of course, in terms of direct interventions with remittances, yes, the short answer is yes, we have been aggressively doing this. As I said, we are part of the Nexus initiative. Within the Nexus initiative, there is an ASEAN 5 initiative. And the instant payment systems of Singapore, Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, and the Philippines have banded together. And in the next few weeks or months, we know for sure that the portal that will merge cross-border payment systems real-time, bringing down transactions to about 60 minutes or so, less than 60 minutes, that's still rather long. But we know for sure that efforts are underway along these lines. And as I mentioned, we have an Overseas Filipinos Bank. It's a purely digital bank, and we feel that digital is the way to go if we want to further reduce remittance costs. So this is one way, and incidentally, we're finding out that banks are one of the highest in terms of transaction costs, which is not good. But with the Overseas Filipinos Bank, we hope to break the mold. At the Philippines, we're around hovering between 5 and 6% transaction costs. But again, as I mentioned, we'll bring that down to 3% by 2030, 2029.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Thank you so much. If I know one thing about superpowers, it's then even when they are regarded very highly abroad, you usually have some criticism at home. So could you perhaps kindly talk a bit about the downsides and the criticism that you receive at home for this labor export model? For instance, when we talked to some Filipino partners, they did mention that, well, we've been exporting labor for so long and so successfully that perhaps our government has failed to actually create the jobs at home for some parts of the society that do not go abroad. So this is just one area, and Sedef Deering also mentioned, of course, the social impact that there is always when you have large-scale migratory flows. So can you speak a bit about the criticism of the model that comes internally?
First thing I'll say is we don't have a labor export model because our law says we don't promote overseas employment. We always say that it is the workers and the employers who promote through their harmonious relations this phenomenon of overseas employment. And our job, our task is to manage the demand, the supply, etc., and to downplay the adverse effects. And that's why I was pointing out the vulnerabilities in terms of domestic workers and such. I've spoken here for quite a lot now, but there's another half of my work that really keeps me awake at night, and it's the problems that our migrant workers face all around the world, the geopolitical realities all around the world, for instance. So we have our own protective mechanisms. We have our own emergency repatriation and assistance mechanisms to support our workers all around the world. If you're talking of the employment scenario in the country, we have labor force participation numbers at around 52.4 million. And that's the highest in 20 years. That's about a 65% participation rate, and that too is the highest in the last 20 years. We have lesser informality. It used to be 50% informality. We're down to about a third of informality. We have lower unemployment, less than 4%, which is good by our standards. We have lower underemployment, which is less than 12%, which is good by our standards, with lesser underemployment for women, speaking of women. So we're good in terms of the fundamentals. But of course, having said that, we know for sure that there are challenges in running our department. But it's all clear to us that we do not export our workers. They are not commodities. And we don't say export, but instead we support them in their decision to go abroad.
But of course, there's also there's a social impact as well, especially
Yes.
of course when so many women also leave and to work temporarily, sometimes also for longer periods abroad. I have come across a model that you've been, I think, building, which is about community parenting, because of course it's also when women leave, there are a lot of kids left behind and maybe grow up with their mothers abroad. Do you also have
Yes,
specific programs, and maybe would you like to elaborate a little bit on that?
Yes, of course. That's the part that keeps me awake at night, the problems, the social costs. But I'll give you an example. The other night, I got a Facebook message from a domestic worker in Kuwait, and she was troubled, she was worried. She hadn't received her pay for that month. It's been settled anyway, but during that time, she had not received her pay for about a month or so. And her child had stopped high school, college, sorry. And well, my response to her was, we actually have a program to make your child's education free. I mean, we fund your child's education. And it took a while for her to respond. I thought she had dropped off, but she said, I have tears of joy. I'm sorry I didn't respond right away. I didn't know you could support my child's college education. And that's the program of our Welfare Administration Fund, the administrator is here with us today. So that's one way. That's one way. Obviously, we can't get into the personal lives of workers, handhold them through the daily life and the social costs that they encounter. I was a former OFW child, so I very well know the costs. But at the same time, we have these support measures. We have scholarships, we have social counselors, we have social workers, we have helplines available to help them out. I have a couple of good ideas.
Yes, I think we need to finish.
Okay.
But I want to thank you very much, of course, for this rich conversation and also for serving as I think it has served as an inspiration to countries, other countries of origin that aim to also maximize on the benefits of labor migration, but perhaps also as an inspiration for countries that are interested in receiving labor from the Philippines.
Ms. Dewing, I'm sorry, could I just show this photo right here?
Oh, yes.
This was a business plan competition that we conducted for women workers. And coincidentally, the top 3 winners, and they're in the photo, were former domestic workers from Saudi, Kuwait, and UAE. So the winner there, Sweet Rose, has a native bag business, and the one in the middle, Carmelita, has a rabbit and chicken farm. And the one at the far end has a salad vegetable farm. So these are among the things we gave them $8,000 to $10,000 US as a prize. So just to show the efforts we are doing in terms of reintegration of our workers who come back home.
Thank you very much once again to you and also to the audience and audience online. I think we're going to move into the next session right now, which is also about labor migration, but from a more European perspective, global shifts, local needs, addressing skill shortfalls via mobility. But please kindly remain seated in your seats, and the moderator will come to introduce the next session. Thank you.
Okay.